Hello and welcome to another edition of Ask the Consistory, a video podcast produced by the Confessional, Orthodox, Evangelical Lutheran Communion. I'm your host for this video, Reverend Jake Zabel of St. John's Evangelical Lutheran Church located in Dalby, Queensland, Australia. So a question for this video is the question about lay consecration. During this time of coronavirus or COVID-19, a lot of people can't gather for Holy Communion in their churches. And so the question has been asked, if the people are stuck in their own homes, can't the lay people just consecrate the elements in their own homes? The answer is no, but in this video I'm going to be explaining why lay consecration is an inappropriate practice. Before I get started, I'd like to recommend heading over to my other YouTube channel that I do, the Order of Knight George, and checking out my video Little Luther on lay consecration. There I go through the entire argument for why we don't allow lay consecration and why it is not a good practice in Lutheran churches. I'd like to, for these Ask the Consistory videos, give the same kind of in-depth response. However, that would make this video be quite long. So instead, I'm going to do 3 videos answering this question of lay consecration. The first video, I'm going to be looking at just some of the arguments put forth by the proponents of lay consecration. In the second video, I'm going to actually take a look at one of the proof texts provided by proponents of lay consecration. And in the third video, I'm going to be looking at the question of lay consecration and the concept of emergencies. And in my internet communion video, I mentioned how I was going to have this lay consecration video out a day or so after the internet communion video, and I'm still actually intending to do that. And so I'm also going to try and have all 3 of these lay consecration videos within a day or so of each other. So you're going to get like 4 videos in 1 week rather than the standard weekly ATC video. The reason I'm doing this is that I think all 4 of these videos need to be watched kind of within a short period of time. I don't want to have them all being a week apart because I think that will make the answers given a lot less impactful. So I think it would be more important to have all 4 of these videos put out around the same time so that they can be watched in close succession of each other. And I'd actually like to suggest, if you're watching this video on lay consecration and the other 2 videos aren't up yet, I'd recommend you don't watch it right now. Wait till all 3 videos are up and then watch all 3 videos in a row. I mean, I could have just done this as one large video, but I thought that was a bit too much. So I've decided to break this up into 3 videos. So let's get started then with some of the arguments given by the proponents of lay consecration and my response as to why they do not support the practice of lay consecration. And so the first argument is that lay consecration is adiaphora. Now, for those who don't know my own history, I used to belong to the Australian Evangelical Lutheran Church. It's a little synod here in Australia, and they, a good decade plus ago, actually had this debate over lay consecration. And so I've discussed this topic with both sides, the proponents of lay consecration and the opponents of lay consecration, and I've researched and studied all the writings and papers and books and stuff that they produced around this topic. And so some of the arguments in favor of lay consecration that I'm going to be putting forth in these videos are actual arguments put forth by proponents of lay consecration. I've had these arguments told to me, I have seen them read, I have responded to them in numerous circumstances, and now I'm going to respond to them here in this video. And so the first argument that is generally put forth in favor of lay consecration is an argument of adiaphora. And so what is adiaphora? Adiaphora is the concept of free things, things that are neither commanded nor forbidden by Scripture, like should a pastor wear vestments? Should we have candles on the altar? The Bible does not command us nor forbid us from doing these things. So we don't have to do them, but we're not forbidden from doing them. And so some proponents of lay consecration will argue that lay consecration is adiaphora. But to this I ask, what is adiaphora? What are you saying is adiaphora? When you actually say lay consecration is adiaphora, what are you saying? What you mean is that it's an adiaphora for a lay person to consecrate the elements. Therefore, you're saying that it is neither commanded nor forbidden in Scripture for a lay person to consecrate the elements. And to some degree, they are correct. There is not a single Bible verse that says a lay person can't consecrate, and there is not a single Bible verse that says a lay person should consecrate. However, there's plenty of things in the Bible that we don't do, that we know from clear teachings in Scripture that are right or wrong, but there is no explicit Bible verse that says so. I mean, a side topic, but this is slightly a side point, but a good example is the doctrine of the Trinity. There is no explicit Bible verse that uses the word Trinity, yet we use that all the time. There are things that, while they are not explicit from Scripture, by reading the Scriptures, we can learn what Scripture wants us to do, what Scripture commands us to do, and what Scripture forbids us from doing. And so, while the Scriptures do not anywhere explicitly say a lay person cannot consecrate, I mean, I've never even seen the word lay person in the Scriptures, so there is no such Bible verse that says a lay person cannot consecrate. But I'm going to show you several Bible verses that actually teach that a lay person should not consecrate, but that a pastor should consecrate. Because whereas the Bible does not explicitly say a lay person can't consecrate, the Bible does in numerous places actually explicitly say that it is the pastors who are to consecrate. And so the first verse comes from Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 to 12, where it says that God gave pastors for the work of the ministry, and that is the ministry of word and sacrament. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20 calls the pastors the ambassadors of Christ who stand in his stead. And also 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 1 says that the pastors are the stewards of the mysteries of God. And if you go and look up the Apology of the Augsburg Confession in the Book of Concord, Melanchthon quotes both those last two verses, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20, and 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 1, to say that pastors are the ambassadors of the word and sacraments, that it is pastors who are to administer word and sacrament and not the laity. So Melanchthon actually says in the Apology of the Augsburg Confession, based on these two verses, that it is the pastors who stand in the place and stead of Christ, and it is the pastors who are to administer word and sacrament. See, lay consecration is not an adiaphora because God does give us a clear command that it is the pastor who is to consecrate. See, Article 14 of the Augsburg Confession also says that nobody should publicly preach, teach, or administer the sacraments without a right call. And the Lutheran dogmaticians said that this was based on three key Bible verses. The first is Hebrews chapter 5, verse 4, which says that nobody takes the office of pastor upon themselves, but they must be called. Romans chapter 10, verse 15, that says no one should preach unless they are sent. And also in Jeremiah 23:21, where God says that he did not command the false teachers to go forth to preach, and yet they went and prophesied without a call. See, these are the Bible verses that says that a person should not act in the office of the ministry without a proper call. And so we know from the Scriptures that it is the office of the ministry which is to administer word and sacrament. And the Bible also says that you are not to do the functions of the ministry without a proper call. You should not act as a pastor unless you've been called to be a pastor. So while the Bible does not explicitly say the words, a layperson can't consecrate, it does say that a pastor is to administer the sacraments and that a person should not act as a pastor unless they've been called to be a pastor. And this leads us then to another argument which has been put forth by proponents of lay consecration. And this is an interesting one because it tends to contradict some of the other arguments that they have. This argument is that a lay person is called. And this contradicts their first argument that lay consecration is an adiaphora. This is generally their response once they accept that lay consecration is not an adiaphora. But this argument also contradicts with another argument, which we'll discuss in the third video, that it's okay to do lay consecration in an emergency situation. See, this argument has been put forth to argue that they are not breaking Article 14 because the layperson has been called into an auxiliary or supporting office, and that therefore they can consecrate the element in the absence of a pastor because they've been called by the church to do so. The first problem with this argument is that it conflicts with other arguments, specifically the argument about lay consecration being done in cases of an emergency. See, if a layperson is called to this position, then it is not an emergency. See, in the cases of an emergency baptism, the layperson is not called by a congregation to baptize this dying infant or even dying adult. Instead, the layperson just acts in a moment of, life or death when this person is about to die and just consecrates them without a call. They just act, they don't think, they don't wait for a call from the congregation, they just do. But if a congregation was to extend a call to a layperson to baptize people when their pastor is not around, then this is not an emergency but a regularized call. See, if I were to go and put out a fire in a case of emergency, that doesn't make me a firefighter. But if the town was to hire me to go and fight fires, then that makes me a firefighter. See, if a congregation calls you to act as a minister, then they are calling you to the office of the ministry. This is why the early church and the medieval church had the office of ordained deacons. These were people who, yes, they served in an assisting role, but they were called and ordained. And if the regular called and ordained priest was not present, then those deacons could step up and take his place. He could baptize, he could consecrate, he could preach. But that's because he was a called and ordained minister, although he was an assisting minister. He didn't normally act by himself. He normally only acted in a position of assistance. He was still called to be a minister because the congregation called him to do the functions of the office of the ministry. And so this leads us to another point, is that you can't be both a minister and a layperson. See, the pastor is the minister or servant of word and sacrament. If the congregation calls an individual to serve them with word and sacrament, then he stops being a layperson and he starts being a minister. The word layperson literally means of the people. The word lay comes from the Greek word for person. To be a lay person means you are a person of the people. To be a lay minister means you belong to the people, but you're also a servant of the people. That's a contradiction in terms. You are either a lay person or you are a minister of the lay people. You can't be both. And so this wraps up the first video on lay consecration. Join us for the next video where I'm going to look at one of the proof texts put forth by proponents of lay consecration and show why it does not support the practice of lay consecration. I've been your host, Reverend Jake Zabel. Goodbye and God bless.